It's my belief that Ed Reed's ultimate desire is to be the head coach of an HBCU, and if that's what he wants to do, he's finally taking the right steps to get it done. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode will wrap up with what was really a wild day in HBCU basketball. I got 3 games that I want to break down from Monday night in segment 2. In segment 2, North Carolina A&T is bringing back the glory days. They're bringing back the glory days with Sean Gibbs, and you should look at the staff that he is attempting to build. But in segment 1, speaking of staffs, speaking of coaches, Ed Reed is taking all of the proper steps that he should be taking in order to become an HBCU head coach. Ed Reed is finally making his journey into the coaching ranks. Instead of just saying, I'm Ed Reed and I'm going to go into the HBCU landscape and coach, he has decided that he is going to become the offensive coordinator on a high school level. Is going to be specifically at his son's high school. I think that this is very important. However, I do understand what the initial statement and the initial response could be. The initial response to all of this could be, why are we speaking about Ed Reed? The reason I know that could be the response is because I've read those comments, not just on my videos, but also in social media. I've read, and this is the one that was more interesting. Why does he have to coach at an HBCU? Why does just let him go to a PWI? The last one, I think there's a lot of validity to that. The last comment, I think there's a lot of validity of why an HBCU, but I can't answer that question. In my opinion, all of his actions have lined up to tell me he wants to coach at an HBCU. Is it some divine purpose of his? I don't know. Does he look at it as an easy way in? I highly doubt it, because if he thought it was an easy route, he would have been given up, because this has been nothing but difficult for Ed Reed every step of the way. So I can't say that he views it as an easy route. But I don't know why he seems so impassioned to coach at an HBCU. But what I can tell you is every time Ed Reed is in the conversation, every time that Ed Reed is in the conversation for some sort of coaching position, it's always an HBCU. The reason we talk about it is because I do believe he is aiming for that. And honestly, I think every year for the next couple of years, unless he gets one, I think you're going to continue to hear Ed Reed's name thrown around. If he doesn't get a job in 2 years, I think it'll finally dissipate. That'll be 5 years since we've really gotten to this point. But it's funny to me. Everybody has an opinion on celebrity coaches. It feels like the majority narrative, right? I know that it's pretty even, but the one that's loudest, at least, is that we don't want it. But I bet you there was a lot of people who used to feel opposite, and Ed Reed was one of the names, if not the loudest name, that everybody screamed. Ed Reed was the coach when it wasn't that many, when it wasn't a hot thing to do, and it was only a couple, probably Sanders and George. When it was just those two, it was Ed Reed that everybody was screaming, please make it Ed Reed somewhere. Any vacancy you saw Ed Reed tied to. But the vacancies that he was really tied to, actually connected to, it was probably only 3. It was Bethune-Cookman, it was Alabama A&M, and it was Grambling. Bethune-Cookman was obviously the first one, and we all know how that happened. We all know how that happened. He actually got the job. And when he got the job, he saw some things he didn't like. He went to social media, commented on that. And I would argue that I even argue that was the catalyst, that was the genesis for all of the disdain towards Ed Reed. When he got up there and he said what he said about the facilities at Bethune-Cookman and how they weren't clean. This wasn't just, oh man, y'all got a bad weight room. This was, no, literally there's trash in all of these places. This is not how we should be running things. When he got up there, that was directed at a specific group of people. I don't believe that Ed Reed disrespected HBCUs. I don't believe that Ed Reed disrespected Bethune-Cookman. And I'm using my words very carefully. A lot of times I'll say you didn't intend to disrespect. I do not believe that he successfully disrespected Bethune-Cookman or HBCUs. What I believe that he did, if there was any intention behind it, it was aimed directly to the higher ups at Bethune-Cookman. But for some reason, people have held on to that. Excuse me. People have held on to that for years. I think that summer when he was doing the interviews, I didn't like that. I thought that was a tad bit distasteful. But overall, Ed Reed displayed emotion that you would either call passionate or emotional. It's really no in between. I think that there's this notion that he's just erratic. He may have had an erratic moment. He may have had a moment where he got caught up. I don't necessarily think that he's just erratic. I don't know if that's just his personality. I would understand the fear if you are a team hiring him, that if things aren't going well, he may use social media, and that should be a discussion in all of your interviews. It's not something that you can know for sure, but it's something that should be discussed. Hey, what's the usage of social media? And that should be brought up because you should handle those things in house. You should handle those things in house, in my opinion. And that doesn't mean don't shed a light on some of the issues, but in general, we should be working together. Maybe that's the better way to say it. In house feels like a cover up. We should be working together to fix these things. But I'm going on, I'm saying all this stuff. But the point is, Ed Reed is taking the right steps. And I could argue that every step of the way, Reed has done a good job of making up on where he went wrong. When it came to Bethune-Cookman, it's as easy as put the phone down. So him putting the phone down, I'm not going to give him credit for, but the statement that he gave out about how he let his emotions get the best of him, how he shouldn't have been doing these things, to me, it was an accurate description. He didn't just say I was completely wrong, boom. It was a well thought out explanation, a well thought out apology of what he did wrong. And I mean, he hasn't had the opportunity to do it again. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. I understand if you maybe wouldn't want to. But then you get to the Grambling hire, and I think he was very loosely connected to Grambling, but it was a name that floated around for a little bit. I think that was just because it was a hot thing to do. He was legitimately connected to the Alabama A&M job. I'm not saying it was in his grasp, but he was legitimately connected. They legitimately sat down with him. But one of the boxes that they had that he clearly didn't meet was coach high school and college. There was a couple of boxes he didn't really meet, but that one in specific was large. And that's why just the idea of him coaching on the high school ranks is extremely important. See, to the original question, why does he have to coach at an HBCU? Why can't he coach at a PWI? I don't know. I don't have that answer. But what I will say is that his eyes seem set on HBCUs. Along the journey, he may find a new destination. He very well may build himself up as an offensive coordinator, which we'll get to in a second. He may build himself up as an offensive coordinator, and now other people come calling, and he decides that this is what I want to do. Maybe he did feel like HBCUs was his best way in, and he finds a new route. Who knows? But what I will say is nothing has shown me he's going anywhere else, and everything has shown me that he really wants to do this. Now he's coaching offensive coordinator, which on the high school ranks should give you some sort of understanding of those kids. On the high school ranks, it should give you a recruiting pitch, the ability to do that. Like once you start coaching high school, you should understand how these guys think. And if somebody says, hey, how are you going to recruit X, Y, and Z? Oh, I know. Boom, 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 boom. And now you have a recruiting plan. So if we're looking at the boxes that Alabama A&M had, he probably didn't check that recruiting plan box. You know what I mean? Like if we're just going to be honest, if we're going to be honest, that most likely didn't happen because Ed Reed is Ed Reed. And there's probably a notion that, hey, I could get this kid here because I'm me. And a lot of those guys showed allegiance to him because he was him. But it doesn't always work that way when you're trying to go into a room where people aren't at, where people aren't already leaning towards you. You got to have some sort of plan. I think coaching high school will help you develop that. That's my personal opinion. Um, it checks. I'm just trying to think of all the boxes that it checks for them. It'll be the coaching high school / college. It'll be the recruiting and all of those things, right? He's in Atlanta right now, but I think that this is going to be really good for him, in my opinion. I would say Ed Reed was very rough around the edges. He needed some refinement as far as how this game goes, and he's figured it out. He's figured it out. And I think being an offensive coordinator gives him a leg up in the negotiation once he tries to go back to the college ranks, because we know he's a defensive mastermind on the field. We knew he's a defensive mastermind on the field. So we believe that he'll be able to tell us all about defense and help that side of the ball. But if you're an offensive coordinator, now you got both sides that you have proficiency in. In my opinion, Ed Reed feels his destiny is to be a head coach at an HBCU, at least in his first step. And in order to do that, you got to have some experience now. Maybe there's a little bit more of a bigger microscope that is being placed on him because of everything that happened at Bethune-Cookman. Regardless, he's going to have to prove himself more than other quote-unquote celebrity coaches, but still probably less than coaches who work their way up the rank. Regardless. Ed Reed going to coach on a high school level is going to get him acclimated to the structure of football, to the structure of coaching when he's not the one playing or being coached. Now he's the one leading the players from a coach's chair. He's not leading them as one of the best players on the field. I think he needed this. And as he tries to work to what he believes his eventual destiny will be, this was a great step to take, and it was a necessary step to take. As we push forward, I want to take a look at North Carolina A&T because they just announced their coaching staff, and it's really a lot of returning Aggies. Maybe not all at the same time, but they're coming back home. And I don't think that this is an accident. Sean Gibbs is doing this on purpose, and I want to break this down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Wayfair. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like giving your home a little bit of TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. I notice when everything's a little too messy, I can't even think straight anymore. I don't know what that's about, but that's my life. Wayfair has everything that I need, all within my budget. And the same is true for you if you're trying to give your space a new look to start the year. Like, say you're looking for furniture. Wayfair has some beautiful couches. I've seen some nice, colorful suede couches. I've seen green, I've seen orange, I've seen purple, I've seen yellow. They're all fantastic. You just pick whatever your color of choice is. There's something for every style, every home, no matter what your space is or your budget is. Make sure you check out both of those. Did Wayfair help you out in the time crunch? Was the delivery fast, free, hassle-free? If you've used it, it was likely all three of those things. Give your home a little bit of a refresh that it needs from Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every day, every style, every home. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure that you're checking out Locked On College Football because we have everything that you need to get ready for the big dance. I just heard that Coco Jones is performing. I will be listening. To the national anthem. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. But you go ahead and listen to Locked On College Football to prepare for the game. I'll go listen to our album to prepare for the anthem. All of that being said, let's keep it pushing with North Carolina A&T and not let my fandom get in the way. So North Carolina A&T and Sean Gibbs have really bolstered this roster with former Aggies. And I don't think that this is an accident. Let's listen to not listen, I'm going to say it to you, so you'll be listening. But let's see what Coach Gibbs had to say. And this is a direct quote. He said, "I'm excited about the staff we have assembled here. We have several guys who have ties to A&T and have accomplished many things as players and coaches in the HBCU world and in the pros as players." I would say that statement is led That statement is led by the decision to bring in Denzel Jones as your defensive coordinator. It's one of the people that he did bring with him from Fort Valley State. It's not a lot of them. It's not a lot of people that he brought from Fort Valley State. I would consider this more so a North Carolina A&T reunion as opposed to a Fort Valley State continuance. That's the way that I would view this roster, but I'm not mad at him. The reason I'm not upset about going back to the quote unquote glory days is because I'm saying this as an outsider. Aggie, let me know if I'm wrong, if I'm speaking out of turn. But it feels like the culture was lost these last couple of years. And it's not just because you're not winning. The way that people talk about them, the way that they're discussed, I said it. I'm not a fan of 2-year firings. And when 2-year firings, I mean, you've been there for 2 years and you get fired. Obviously, no one's ever been fired over the course of 2 years, but just for clarification purposes. Um, I'm not a fan of that. But when it came to A&T, I made a quick exception because the way they were trending was unbecoming of a program that prestigious. That's the way that I felt. And when you really go into the toilet the way that North Carolina A&T did, sometimes you need a reminder of who you are, you know? Sometimes you just need a reminder of the standard that is supposed to be set when you put on them colors. Supposed to have a reminder of the standard that is supposed to be set and has been set by your predecessors, and not the ones who were here last year and the year before, but the ones who were there in the Sam Washington era. And there's some holdover here. Speaking specifically, Denzel Jones, the defensive coordinator, who did come over from North Carolina A&T, or excuse me, who did come over from Fort Valley State, but he's an Aggie through and through. He's an Aggie through and through. Defensive MVP in the Celebration Bowl. Y'all know, y'all remember. I'm sure you remember when A&T was dominating that event. He was the defensive MVP in the game. You're looking at Denzel Jones, who ended up being the linebackers coach at North Carolina A&T when his playing days were over. He was under Sam Washington. When Sam Washington left, he went ahead to Fort Valley State with Sean Gibbs. Right? Like this is what we're looking at on a connection level. When he says I have several guys with ties to A&T, it doesn't just stop at Denzel Jones. You also have the offensive line coach, Ron Mattis. You have the wide receiver coach, Nate Poole, the running backs coach, Keith Henry, the outside linebackers coach, Terry Lance. You have Denzel Jones, who is going to be the defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. But you have two of those guys, both from A&T. You have the tight ends coach in Stephen Barnett. Then you have the assistant linebackers coach in Alex Purvance. You're looking at 3 different linebackers coaches. You're looking at 3 different, and every single one has A&T ties. Every single one. To me, there is a physicality that comes with those colors. There's a physicality that comes with those letters, with that uniform. It's a physicality when you're looking at it. There's a reason that we called it running back U. And I know that you have only one running backs coach, but linebacker coach, tight end coach, assistant linebacker coach, offensive line coach. These are all physicality positions. These are all physicality positions. So we're setting standards. And I know we're sitting here talking about, oh, hey, the standard of A&T for what it used to be versus the standard of what it is now, it's nowhere near the same. And that is true. That is completely accurate. But the important part to note as well is while it did change, it doesn't mean that you can't go back and reset that standard to what it used to be. And sometimes the standard doesn't get met. And that's when we start having issues. If you want to say, hey, this standard wasn't met, cool. But the standard is the standard. How we plan to operate as a program is how we plan to operate as a program. That doesn't matter if we're successful or not. This is what or if you're not successful, you probably should change the way you operate and then try to, make some tweaks. But you get the point. The point is where we're trying to reach is where we're trying to reach. So I think that you should strive for greatness, even if you aren't the one making it. The one player, or excuse me, the one coach who really caught my eye that wasn't from A&T is your offensive coordinator, Greg McGee. Now, the reason I was interested by the decision to add Greg McGee is he comes over from Howard. He was their quarterbacks coach. I thought you would just bring your offensive coordinator, right? Like defensively, you had the best run defense on your subdivision. So it made sense to bring your DC. Of course, you were dominant on the run game, physicality, but you were dominant in the run game. But you also had the best running attack in the conference multiple times, at least the individual leader right? Like that happened with your offensive coordinator. I thought they were gonna bring over Hirsch. I did, the offensive coordinator. So now it makes me wonder the decision to go from Hirsch to McGee as your offensive coordinator, if you're Sean Gibbs, does that mean we're going to have a little bit more reliance on the pass game? Because over the last couple of years, Howard was better at passing the ball, or they did it more, I should say. They passed the ball more than they were running the football, and they were higher ranked through the air than they were on the ground. Even though they had 3 good running backs, then they had 2 good running backs. I've never been a fan of how I haven't been a fan of 2024 of how Howard was using their running backs. Does this mean that you're going to see a more pass happy Aggie team? I don't know. This is things that I want to ask. You had a really good running attack at Fort Valley State. You decided to get a new offensive coordinator who comes from somewhere where I don't really think it was consistent usage of the running game despite the running backs you had. He wasn't the OC, he was quarterback's coach, but still that's where he came from. Well, are you going to be a running the football team? That's definitely what I expected when Sean Gibbs was named. I'll be watching out for that in not really spring ball. I don't think I'll get much info on that or insight, but I will be watching for that once the season starts. Now, as we push forward, we're going to wrap up with what was a crazy day in HBCU basketball. I have one women's game from the MEAC and I have 2 men's game from the SWAC. Let's break that down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying twice for? That's definitely happened to some people. I've had a few subscriptions that I didn't realize that I was still paying for. And Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down that it's like a personal assistant in the palm of my hand for all of my finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. At the end of the day, nobody wants to spend all of the money that they have. So it brings all of those aspects together into one place. And Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions. It's simple, it's easy, and it's here for you to use. Please make sure you're not having any unwanted subscriptions. It feels silly, but it happens to a lot of us. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on. Rocketmoney.com/locked on. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. This was a crazy Monday night. For those who don't know, there's only men's games in the SWAC on Monday night. The women play on Thursday and Saturday. The men play on Saturday and Monday. So there's a doubleheader on Monday still. It may get a little confusing because this is the first year of that. And there's still a work in progress to get people accustomed to how things are operating. So I'll try to help as much as I can. But overall, it was a crazy day. And though there was no women playing in the Southwest, in the Mid-Eastern, they had a game. They had Howard versus Coppin State. It was one that was looked forward to with, I'm not going to say that obviously the conference wasn't in the balance, but it was one that was being looked forward to with big eyes because you had Coppin State who just played Norfolk State, and now you play Howard. I don't envy that at all. Both games on the road, and you had to play the top 2 teams in the conference. Unfortunately, Coppin State lost both of those games. I think that you have to kind of slot them in at 3 right now. Even though there was a lot of love and a lot of hype that they could be one of the 2 best, you lost to Norfolk State and you lost to Howard. So with that being the case, you can't go no higher than 3 right now. I would love to see what happens when they come to Coppin State, when Coppin State's the one hosting. But right now I had to go from Norfolk to Washington. I'm sorry. Maybe if it was a Monday to Saturday, but this was Saturday to Monday. It was a quick turnaround. There's no excuses within it, but it's still at the same time just a situation that I don't think anybody's envying that. I don't think anybody, if I gave every team in the MEAC, I say, hey, you get to play Norfolk State and you get to play Howard, but you got to play them both on the road back to back. You cool with that? Nobody's cool with that. But at the end of the day, they played the game. And I think that a big story, the two big stories in this game should be Angel Jones' struggle shooting the basketball in the second half, and then also the 30-point fourth quarter by Howard. When you go and you crack down these numbers, excuse me, Angel Jones went seven of 11 from the field in the first half. Big day. I couldn't log into my ESPN Plus. I don't know what the deal was. I got to get that figured out. But I couldn't log into my ESPN Plus. I was able to see the stat sheet, and this was a couple minutes left in the second quarter. 19 points. I'm like, oh, Angel Jones is hooping, right? She is hooping right now. She ended up with 22. And when you break it down, she went 7 of 11 from the field, finished 8 of 19. Started off 2 of 3 from 3, ended up just going 2 for 4. So she didn't shoot that many threes in the second half. And then she was 3 of 4, excuse me. She was 3 of 4 from the line, ended 4 of 6. So it wasn't a lot of trips to the line afterwards either. But I think that slowdown by Jones definitely impacted things. You didn't see it in the third quarter, but in the fourth quarter, you walked in with a big lead. You walked in with a big lead. You were up 22 points going into the fourth quarter. And or excuse me, you were up 12 points, not 22. But you were up 12 points going into the fourth quarter. And Howard ended up making up that lead with a 17-point advantage in the last 10 minutes of this game. Howard dropped 30 points in that quarter. Coppin State had 13. You're looking at just the shooting percentage. Coppin State only shot 25%, 3 of 12. Meanwhile, you're looking at a 67% field goal percentage by the Bison. That was really the difference. You had the star player who kind of slowed down, and then you had Howard who really heated up. So real quick, I want to get to two more games in the SWAC. Alcorn versus Alabama State was a really close one. But I would say that when you have CJ Hines and Amar Knox, who are the only double-digit scorers, but then you go on Alcorn side and they got 1, 2, 3, 4 of those players, it's a little bit different. And then you have another player at 9 points. It's a little bit different of a situation. Alcorn ended up winning by just 2 points. It came down to the last seconds. You actually had Alabama State fighting to catch up the entire second half. They get the lead with a minute and a half. Alcorn snatches that back real quick, and they don't give it up, but you end up winning by 2. And then there's just a triple overtime game. I don't think I have to sell Jackson State versus Alabama A&M. And this is the game that I really think fatigue sets in. AC Bryant drops 39. The next closest person is 28 points behind him. Meanwhile, you're looking at Jackson State, 23, 17, 18, 16. That's 4 players who have more than 15 points. Alabama A&M only had 1. And ultimately, that's the type of stuff that makes the difference. So, crazy night in basketball. Tomorrow, we'll be back to talk about the all too early FCS Top 25, which HBCUs are represented. The one that is, I'm not surprised at all. In the meantime, between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.